Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency and revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS-compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Hey everyone, welcome back. A lot of people have been really excited and intrigued to learn about how we can integrate technology. This show started around wellness and leadership and culture, but when we talk about police performance, which is really the crux of everything we're talking about and why it all matters, technology and relevant tools are definitely a foundational piece. And so I'm excited to have some of the team from SoundThinking. We're going to be talking about CrimeTracer today, but I have two guests joining us to talk about how we can leverage technology, work smarter, not harder, and also just build in efficiency, right? We can all recognize that in this hyper information age we're in, any data, stats, crime trends, they can be extremely overwhelming in an inbox, in an in-tray, and on and on. So joining us today, we have Paul Bailey, we have Joel Ste. Paul, we'll start with you. Welcome to the show. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with SoundThinking?
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Eric. I appreciate it. My name's Paul Bailey. I'm the Senior Director of Customer Success and Product Development at SoundThinking. I've been with CrimeTracer for 20 years. It used to be called CopLink, and that's when I started with them. CopLink came out of University of Arizona AI Lab, and I was an engineer and an architect and been a product manager for the last few years. So it's great to be here talking about something I love.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Joel, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate you having us on. I'm Joel Ste. I'm Senior Director of Customer Success and Solutions for SoundThinking. So myself and my team are all former law enforcement. Really, our job is to make sure that folks are getting the most out of what they're paying us for. So really, efficiency and effectiveness is what drives us. And I'm really excited to.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me. And as I kind of introed, we're talking about how we can leverage all this information. And so even when I think back to when I started closer to 20 years ago to today, being on different email boards and trying to get the latest and greatest information, but also actionable information that you got to put into practice right now. And sometimes you have these old bulletins, these new bulletins, and what's the PC? Do we have reasonable suspicion for this car or for a subject? And that's extremely relevant when we talk about the liabilities and the investigative process. So I know that everyone's going to understand all the pieces that we start talking about, but could one of you just open it up and talk about what CrimeTracer is and what we're really looking at today?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it, a couple of different ways. One is Google for Cops, as we like to call it. It came out in the early 2000s, and the idea was that it was really a tool for pulling together information from disparate data sources, RMS systems within an agency and then across agencies. And what we found was that its sweet spot was tactical lead generation. So if you're an investigator, you're a detective, pulling all this information together to be able to give you one central place to search for leads was invaluable to the agencies who were using it. And so we spread from Tucson through Arizona and California across the nation. And we have over 3,000 different data sources and 2,000 agencies using it, and a nationwide data footprint of all the agencies, RMS records, JMS, over 50 different data types. Because these agencies realize that they need to be sharing information to be able to get the job done. And that's what we excel at.
I think one of the things that kind of came out of, the original development of CopLink, as Paul said, Paul's down in Tucson where this thing was born. Sharing data between Tucson and the greater Phoenix area was certainly a goal, but I think that really as the product emerged and really this whole concept of consolidation, right? And just taking data and kind of packing it into a database and giving people a tool to search it is one thing, but really being able to take all of this disparate data from different sources and combine all the Joel Ste. Maries from, 15 different systems into a single Joel record is something that's very important when you're doing investigations and you want to find things like who are all the people that are associated to Joel, right? I don't want to read 45 reports and count the Jason St. Maries and all those reports. What I can do if I consolidate that data is that I can basically build a stack ranked list of associates of all of the people that show up in those reports and how many times they show up, right? So if you're consolidating people, if you're consolidating vehicles, if you're consolidating addresses, everything is linked together. And it allows the investigator to explore really all of those non-obvious relationships in the data by starting from a single target. And that's one of the things that, from the very beginning that CopLink and now CrimeTracer is really focused on is how do we determine from all of these different records where we have name variations, we have diminutive names, we have people that lie about their date of birth, right? So how do we figure out who is who to be able to consolidate those records?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just going off of that a little bit, CopLink was unique at the time because it was in the olden days of AI and talking smarter, not harder. We were what was considered an expert system. And an expert system is a system where you have rules that are generated by experts, in this case, cops, as to how the data is managed. And so we literally got a room full of cops together to decide how do we consolidate people? What are the different pieces of a person's identity that when we look at them, we can say, yeah, this is the same person or this is likely the same person. And that set us apart from anything else that might have been statistics based or it might have been probability based at the time.
Yeah. No, thanks for illustrating that because for those audience members span everywhere from brand new officers to senior executives, right? And so being in the little middle of those two pools, I recognize that I'm not doing the boots on the ground work frequently anymore. However, as you're saying this, I'm almost having flashbacks of just getting, for one, our RMS, right? So our report managing systems, all of our, where we write reports and we have all this subject information, criminal information is all completely siloed and separate, right? And through the years, there have been better versions that integrate some, usually regional assets, but then not all of them. And so that's a super layman's version of when we do get into those systems, if you have the permissions or you have someone that can help you with that, then you're looking at just screens and pages of, Eric Tongues or Eric Wong's, right? Maybe we have a similar close date of birth as we were talking about Joel saying all the Joel Ste. Maries, not the James St. Maries, but you're going to get all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to click through like manually and look at each one. And some of them, as you're kind of alluding to, might be completely irrelevant, and some of them might be off, but they might be the same person. They might be an alias. And so thanks for just illustrating the need, because when we talk about resource shortages, staffing shortages, caseload, all these things, it's absolutely critical that we do leverage this information and technology the best we can. So it's not a human being sussing through all that. So I appreciate you illustrating that.
Yeah, that's a great point. There was an early study that was done on the effectiveness of CopLink, now CrimeTracer, and it showed that there was a sevenfold improvement in time to case closure by using this tool rather than just going through individual reports, like you were saying, or going to the file cabinet and doing it the old-fashioned way. So there really is a huge time benefit to being able to have all this information in one place.
Talking about boots on the ground, Eric, it kind of brings up this whole concept of, solvability and how that becomes more effective if the tools are in the hands of the patrol officers, right? We work with several agencies, one particular in Northern California that did a 5-year case study and looked at a reduction in violent crime rates across a 5-year period. And really, the way that they tackled it is they took the tool and they put it on the phone and they put it in every officer's hands, so that if you're out on a call and you have some information and you have the time and you don't have 6 calls stacked up, you can take that information, find related information, maybe find an address, maybe go find somebody and make an arrest that day, rather than writing your report, throwing it over the fence into investigations and stacking it on the pile. Right. And so what you see is a couple of things: is that you're reducing violent crime because you're taking these people off the streets, but you're also reducing your caseload by being able to go hook somebody up that day because you have the tools to be able to do it. Right. And so those things kind of go hand in hand when you put the right tools in the right place and time.
Yeah, that's a great example because 7 times, that's a huge number. Of course, there's going to be correlation to the solvability. And I love that because a lot of agencies in the nation are extremely small. And so the majority of agencies are small departments, right? So you actually do you catch it, you clean it, and you do the most you can with it, which is to say you do the data mining, you look for leads, you find, outside agency reports, and you build the case that you can, and you chase down these different things. But I love how you made the example too, where maybe you are that patrol officer that's trying to develop, and you have that culture where, no, you do as much as you can within your shift or within the week if it's not pressing, and then you pitch it over because detectives have a ton of stuff to do. But regardless, it sounds like whoever's doing it will have access to that. So can you tell me more about the phone aspect, right? Is this an app, or what does this platform look like? How do officers access that?
Yeah. So the main component, well, it was developed originally for investigators and detectives on a desktop or a laptop. But over the past few years, we've recognized that there is an absolute need for having this capability be mobile. And so we've developed apps for the iOS and for Android that you can download from the special links that we have for them, because these are, crime information related applications.
Mm-hmm.
But it's available on the phone. It's available on other formats such as tablet as well, and it's the same exact functionality. So you can be doing the deep dives. You can be doing everything that you would be at the desktop level. So it's very powerful.
Nice.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect of this as well. By putting those tools in the hands of the patrol officer, there's a certain situational awareness and potential officer safety factor as well. When we train folks, we talk about, if you're running a plate, through access, through your state NCIC switch, you're going to get back, the registration, whether or not the vehicle's stolen, who's the registered owner, are they wanted, basic status information on the vehicle and the RO. And with CrimeTracer, you throw that plate into CrimeTracer, you're going to get, 23 documents that vehicle has been involved in. You're going to be able to look and see very quickly what those documents are summarized. So if we have weapons violations, we have drug charges, we have a lot of things that might make your spidey senses tingle, it's going to change the context of that stop, right? So now you know what the vehicle's been involved with. You're also going to be able to see the people in a tag cloud that have been most associated with that vehicle. So if Johnny's driving mom's car, mom shows up as the RO, we might not know anything about who Johnny is, right? Or the passenger. And the folks that have been contacted the most in that vehicle. So that patrol officer is able to approach that vehicle with a lot more situational awareness than they normally would have just by running the plate through your state NCIC switch.
Yeah, I love that example of officer safety, because information is power, and information, we apply some tactics to it, becomes intelligence, like actionable intelligence that can help us navigate a strategy and what to do with it. So that's the tactic side. That's in the real here and now with subjects and unknowns, potential threats around us. But also, like, as you're describing this resource, it's making me think of, I think people outside of the industry or parallel industries would be like, is that seriously a thing? But you find, an abandoned vehicle and there's a bunch of stuff in it, and it looks like it's a bunch of stolen stuff, and there's bullet holes in the car, and you're like, man, was this just in a fresh shootout? This doesn't look old, all that kind of thing. The plate might not come back, or you might not have a registered owner that you can really track down a lead. You might be relying on outside agencies to see if they can go knock on the door, but maybe that's not that safe to knock on the door of this car that just apparently got shot up. You don't know who's associated. It's just the registered owner who's an elderly person. Beyond that, if you don't have any fresh calls in the area, or let me put it this way, maybe the only access to fresh calls with this car would only be in your neighboring cities. You share the same dispatcher or CAD situation. But beyond that, literally a half hour away or 40 minutes away, maybe that car was involved in a shootout, but you don't know. And that's like really jarring to people, I think, on the outside that watch, see it. and they think that there's going to be all this like satellite information and DNA just falling off of the car that you can immediately grab onto. But this is like a real world, real time situation that integrates all this data from all over. So yeah, that's just what's popped into my mind, and I'm curious, where do we get all that data, and like, do agencies have to participate? For those that are curious, like, how this sounds very inclusive.
Yeah, that's right. So we get the data from these individual agencies who have understood the value in sharing. And there are some agencies that are at the forefront of this movement who say, we want to share as much as possible. And they'll go and they'll share their RMS, they'll share the JMS, they'll share different records that maybe even paper copy that we would scan or OCR into the system, because they realize that, there will be needles in the haystack, and there'll be connections between all these different systems that can be found and surfaced through CrimeTracer.
The vehicle example kind of got me going. I'm actually doing a demo here in a little bit after this call for some folks down in the Bay Area on what we do with NIBIN, right? So we're actually able to take in the NIBIN data from the agencies, and really all we need is the case number, the agency ORI, and the hit group number that comes from the ballistics report, right? So those three fields, because we already have the cases, those three fields tie things together, right, in a very unique way. So if I have 6 shootings, and I'll give you this example that I was thinking of. We had a bunch of shootings. This was a couple of summers ago down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? We have the whole state of Tennessee. So all the data from every agency is coming into CrimeTracer. So we have 5 or 6 shootings that occur down in Chattanooga. Shell casings are picked up. They're run through NIBIN. We have that nexus of the ballistics report tying all those shootings together to the same gun. A couple of months later, we have an abandoned vehicle call up in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a couple hours away. Officers respond. The plate is stolen. So they investigate the vehicle, and they find a couple shell casings on the floorboard. And you can see where I'm going with this, right? So this is a Knoxville abandoned vehicle call. The shell casings are scanned into NIBIN, come back to the 5 or 6 shootings that occurred down in Knoxville. They find discharge paperwork from the local ER with this gal's name on it that, lo and behold, is tied to gang members down in Chattanooga, right? So they're able to essentially identify that vehicle. Now they've got a suspect from a couple of shell casings that showed up, just this vehicle just parked in some guy's front yard up in Knoxville, 2 hours away. So again, the needle in the haystack in that case was 3 fields from some NIBIN reports that we got back from these agencies that tied all this information together, that now allows the Chattanooga PD, which is one of our largest customers in the country in terms of usage. They've had all the way back to the old CopLink days. Now they have a suspect from a Knoxville abandoned vehicle call.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And a couple things come to mind. One is that one of my favorite sources of leads or potential evidence is medical paperwork and court paperwork that's just left behind, backpacks, cars, and such. So that's pretty fantastic. A little nostalgic for me. And then also, I'm reminded of an old school sergeant when I was young in the career, and he was famous for saying this, in almost so much that it was cheesy, but it was so true. He'd say, when cops talk, bad guys go to jail. And that's what's ringing out in my head. Like, this is the today's day and age where talking is slow and it's clunky and it's unreliable, and you send out an email, like I was kind of alluding to in the intro, to different investigators, but they're really only the people that are prompt and on top of checking all these, and they're communicating things back. But it's like, that's great. However, we can do better than that, and we ought to do better than that in today's day and age, and to integrate all this information. That's what's really ringing out, is it's the same thing. It's communicating and then getting this all distilled down in a really efficient, effective way.
Yeah, CrimeTracer right now is the ability to communicate from the station out to patrol. So for example, if you want to put together a BOLO or a crime bulletin, somebody within the agency with the right rights to do that can put that out there, put a note out there, and it will be directed to the people who are in their ORI or in that particular area where they need some extra attention. So we definitely understand the need for communication within and across agencies. Another way to do that is by collecting case folder information. So you're working a lead, you're working a case, you're pulling all this stuff together into a case folder within CrimeTracer. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to pass this to somebody else who should take a look at all this information. I can send that case folder or the link to that case folder to somebody else. And that's another way to facilitate this kind of communication, but it is absolutely key. And we're doing everything that we can to be building that kind of communication mechanism into CrimeTracer.
I think that, one of the problems that we're seeing is that as we see more and more technologies emerge and we're getting more types of data, right? So primarily, when CopLink started, it was police reports, CAD calls, citations, bookings, arrests, your common law enforcement documents that were coming in. And now we're doing things with things like NIBIN, with pawn slips, with incarceration records and lists of, cellmates and visitation logs and things like that. And the problem that we're creating for ourselves is that we're just building up more and more data and more haystacks that needle could be in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're finding and where we're headed, and I'm going to tee Paul up to talk a little bit about Gen 3 and where we're headed with some of this stuff with AI, is that we've basically got too much data for a human being to be able to follow all of the potential tactical leads that are connected inside of it. And so we're doing some pretty exciting things with AI, and I'll let Paul talk about.
So one of the things that's directly related to what you're talking about, this mountain of data or more haystacks, is the ability to summarize things. So we have the capability to summarize complicated cases, for example. So the AI can take a look and scan and read and understand the individual supplemental reports that might be attached to a DR and be able to come up with a summary, be able to say there might be some contradictions in here and apply some real time saving mechanisms to those types of documents. And as well, you can do a summarization of a criminal's entire criminal history, where maybe they've got 100 hits with law enforcement, and that can be summarized using AI instead of having to scan through everything. And this is just the tip of the iceberg about what is possible with AI. But we understand that agencies might be a little timid to step into the world of AI with regulations that are out there and so forth. And so we're working closely with different agencies to understand the needs, to understand what the guardrails are, how to help agencies the best that we can, within the constraints that are.
Yeah. And I appreciate you both illustrating this. So just to recap, because I think it is really worth refocusing on, but the amount of information, it's nearly insurmountable. And a good comparison is footage, right? People have cameras. There's different vendors that work with police, but then there's privately owned cameras like residences, right? And so all these common companies now are absorbing all this information that can be very critical to cases. But are you going to have an officer or detective review all this stuff manually? And there are companies and there are products that help utilize AI to scan for you, right? And so I almost hear that same dynamic where it's compiling this all, it's distilling it down, it's telling you where to look. It's also looking for some double check aspect. But like anything, even like pre-AI, just like if you send out a bulletin, hey, request to ID, request for further information, and somebody, an officer from 2 counties away says, hey, that looks like XYZ, a suspect, you need to verify that, right? So you're not just like, filing the charging paperwork and then, having it go to warrant. So it is, for my estimation, very similar that it can help you dial in exactly where to look and then where to verify and then build your case and get some corroborating evidence. And Joel, you're nodding your head there.
Yeah, so some of this stuff, even the knowing where to look part can be very difficult. And one of the first things that Paul and the team did, and it's actually available in the current product, is that we built a chatbot that allows you to either type a question in natural language or speak to it with a microphone. We were showing this to folks out at IACP. I was going to say last month, but it's been 2 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Where I had my headset on and I just sat there asking a question in natural language. And what that allows us to do is to make it very simple to run a very complex search. So CrimeTracer can take, I'm looking for a white male with dark hair between 30 and 50 years old with a tattoo on his left calf, right? If I run that search against 1 billion documents, it's going to go, no, there's just too much data, right? But I also know that this person got into a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra that we identified from the Ring camera across the street, right? And so we can kind of identify the vehicle, and then now we've got these 2 disparate entities, and I can't search for the person because it's too much data. But if I only search for the person in the context of the vehicle, so give me all of the vehicles, right? And let's say there's 1,500 of them. Now go get all the reports that all of those vehicles show up in, right? So now I've got, say, 15, I got 1,500. So now maybe I've got 8,000 reports, right? Now go get all the people from those reports and now search for the person against only the people that have an association to the vehicle. Right? I'm not searching the whole database anymore. I've narrowed down my search field based on the vehicle. So searching something in the context of something else is something that CrimeTracer has been able to do clear back to the CopLink days. It's a very, very complex search to run. And every time we teach the class, I ask, has anybody run a refined search? And a couple of the real sharp analysts will raise their hand, right? And it's because it's hard to do that query. But now I can just put on my headset and ask it that question, and the chatbot will figure out how to build the SQL query to actually run the search. So we're opening up a whole new level of capabilities to folks that are just never going to go learn how to run that query in the tool, but now they can just talk to the systems. The chatbot has been a huge benefit for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, it's knowing how to use the tool, but then you have this chatbot that can help curb that, right? And so just like today still, there are people that are better and worse at just simple internet searches, and then AI prompting is its own art and science and skill base. I was literally just asking the neighborhood thread about a repairman for an appliance, and I came up through my own AI search with a list of things that did not service my area. And my techie buddy down the street says, "Hey, I just put it into AI and I got this local, like literally a mile away guy with amazing credibility." I'm like, how did I not catch this? How did I not find this? And so there might be some acumen there because of industry and just relevance and training, right? And so I love how you illustrate that for those that are like, cool, I have this high speed product, but like, how do I use it, and can I ensure that I can use it effectively?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As technology evolves, we're trying to make things easier. We're trying to democratize the data for everybody within an agency. And AI is certainly showing us a way to do that with the chatbot. But it is going to come along with its own flavor of training. So rather than having a class where you're clicking through a bunch of different forms and you're navigating and you're moving here and you're moving there, and it's 20 things and forget about it. Now it's more like, okay, how do I form the language? How do I ask the right question? With the right details that I know that will bring about the right answer, or the answer that I'm looking for. And hopefully that's a lot less of a burden for an agency and for patrol officers. But you're right, it still has its own tricks that you have to learn.
Yeah. And Paul, you mentioned that some agencies are having caution with AI in general, or some of these AI driven products. Can you think of any of the common maybe hurdles that people are grappling with and potential customers that you're able to absolve that with some information and provide what CrimeTracer and SoundThinking have been able to do and help through that?
Yeah, sure. Just sort of generally, what I've seen happen is that residents, citizens of a jurisdiction will be nervous about AI surveillance, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so this can kind of get misconstrued into how police might be using AI because it's just one word. It's a scary thing. And they might be thinking that, well, AI is surveilling me if I hear that an agency is using it. And what we do is we take a lot of caution, or a lot of, we're very meticulous about explaining that we're not surveilling anybody with the AI. Two is we're not coming to any kind of conclusions or changing the data or changing the record using AI. That's very important to us. And so we're trying to use it as a productivity tool only, just like a microprocessor would be, 30 years ago. There really isn't a difference. And so once we explain that, and we explain that there's very little difference between that, then it seems to alleviate a lot of concern. But it does take educating. It takes a lot of education, and we work really hard to be able to do that and provide that to the agency.
Yeah. Thanks for that example. And it just brings me to the other side of the house, being the police side. And when we do have community member concerns, they come in through emails, they come in through town hall kind of meet and greet a cop, and these questions start showing us trends. A great example in parallel is like UAS, right? So drone programs, and a lot of folks, understandably so, don't want Big Brother. And so what's the way around that? Well, you publish the policy and you tell people exactly, maybe it's available on the website. Maybe you do little snippets of of big wins when you found a missing kid or you found a suspect that was in someone's yard. Like you share that out through your social media, right? You have the microphone, you have the platform, you share out that stuff, and then you tell people where they can find out more. And it's very much like I know a lot of agencies and leaders that they're very clear and transparent about their, let's say, UAS program usage because people are curious. They're concerned. They see something fly overhead, and then they're able to see on social media or another update what the police were looking for, what was going on. And then the concerns are generally absolved, right? And that's just it's kind of part of the times now.
Yeah, I think the appetite, depending on, where you're at, across the country, we've got, some agencies that get it right now. We want it right now. Other agencies are like, we have a policy against it, so we don't even want to look at it. Other agencies are, we're in the process of developing our policy because we know we need to have one. So we see, from one side to the other, across the country, different levels of comfort, I guess, with the technology. And I think to Paul's point is once we get the education out there and get people to understand what this is doing and what it's not doing, what we're trying to do is simplify the investigation that you would have done anyway, right? This investigation that may have taken you 3 weeks to get to pay dirt, the AI may be able to do for you in 3 seconds, right? And so how much time does that give you back to then go work on other things? And it's just a matter of education. And I think, 3 years, 5 years from now, those agencies that are kind of holding back, I think they're going to see the value, and it's going to be a matter of, boy, doing more with less is outweighing our reluctance to get on board with this technology. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah. I could see how, I mean, there's the adage of cops hating change and also hating everything staying the same, right? And so with technology, it does not seem dissimilar to me. We harken back to a time where a detective would have to start calling and sending out requests and receiving faxed reports. Are the reports done? It's not dissimilar from that, right? And that sounds archaic and clunky and unreliable back then to what we have access to now, pretty mainstream. And so this could just be the next iteration. So I appreciate the walkthrough from both of you. I'm curious if there's any kind of summarizing and closing notes that set CrimeTracer apart from other products that might be looking to do something similar, and what you'd like listeners to think about before they reach out, and so that they reach out to learn more.
Yeah, I'll start and Paul, you can finish up. I think, one of the things that we're doing with our safety smart platforms, SoundThinking used to be a company called ShotSpotter that I know most of your listeners are going to be familiar with. The ShotSpotter product is still ShotSpotter. The company name has changed and the CopLink name has changed. But we have a bunch of other products now. One of them is called Plate Ranger, which is an ALPR product that we resell. From a company called Recore. And when you take those three technologies and bring them together, right? So we've got a shooting that occurs and we've got an alert, which puts cops on dots, as we say. So now we know exactly where these shots took place and we can send the response there rather than to the door of the people that may have called 911. And we know that in most cases they don't. But now we've got a place to send the cops to, pick up shell casings and start their investigation. But when we have these occurring throughout a city, right? So we've got, say, 30 shootings that occur in a week. We've got all these different locations, right? CrimeTracer has all this data of everything that's ever happened at that location, and every person, every vehicle, every firearm that's ever been contacted in a report at that location. And then we take the ALPR and we layer that in there. So now what I can do is go, okay, we've got a shooting at this time and place. Go get me every license plate that crossed through that area in a quarter-mile radius, 30 seconds before, 30 seconds after, or whatever the parameters are. Those license plates are meaningless for me just to look through and go, where's my bad guy? Right? So we just set it aside. Now I got another shooting. 100 license plates, set them aside, set them aside. Now you got all these groups of license plates that were together in time and space, right? Where we know there was a shooting. Well, the AI can then crawl all that data and say, why is this license plate at 3 of these shootings? Statistically very rare, right? And now we can take that license plate and then look at that as a nexus to find out all the people that have ever been involved. What are the reports that vehicle is in? Right. And very quickly come to the conclusion that, okay, now we've got a bunch of gang members associated with this vehicle that happen to be in these times and places where shootings occurred. Right. Something a human being would never be able to do. Right. You're never going to be able to comb through all that data. but the AI can. So when we look at, across our platform, just with the products we have and the types of technology that we're now able to employ into the future, I'm very excited about where all these things are headed.
Yeah. Very gripping if there's one vehicle that's been at all three, or maybe even 6 vehicles that have all been at all three, right?
Now look over a year rather than a month, or look over a 3 year, it's like you can broaden your parameters as much as you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did find it is episode 251 with Jamie Algott, where he talks about ShotSpotter specifically for folks that want to go back and listen to that. Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think, Joel mentioned the technological angle. I would think more of what he and I are doing on a day-to-day basis, which is trying to make agencies successful. We have over a 20-year, 25-year record with CopLink and CrimeTracer now. And that's because we've earned the trust of our agencies. And we have very long-standing relationships with a lot of agencies. That's because CopLink was and still is, and as CrimeTracer, built by cops for cops. Like I was saying earlier, we got a bunch of people in a room together to figure out what this algorithm is going to be. And that's still the foundational DNA of what we are. It's knowing that the fundamentals are bulletproof, as I've heard some agencies say, that I think separates us from maybe another company out there that might be waving new shine at an agency. We're tried and true.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and helping really illustrate how this tech can really help shape and change and affect how we combat crime, how we make the public more safe. That is our duty, our calling. It's what we're trying to do effectively, but we need to do it efficiently. And we don't have all the cops we want. We don't have all the detectives we want. And the case load and the call volume just doesn't go to nothing. And so this is very meaningful. And I appreciate both your time and insight. Could one of you please share where people can find out more?
So SoundThinking.com, obviously there's a CrimeTracer product page on there. We've got a lot of testimonials, videos of great stories and ways that people have used the technology. But yeah, I would just point folks to SoundThinking.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Eric. It was great being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.